you?
Hunter.
A doppelganger. A witch.
A hybrid.
A werewolf.
I'm a vampire.
Welcome to the Gilbert Journals, where we discuss the lore of the Vampire Diaries. I'm Fadzai.
And I'm Sandile.
And today we will be discussing the infamous, the constantly referenced, the not nearly as effective as they think they are, founding families of Mystic Falls.
Hui.
TM.
This will be a fun one. This will be a good one.
For those of you who may not know or have forgotten, the founding families are a group of 5 families who settled in Mystic Falls in the 1860s, I guess? Maybe 1850s?
Yeah, a little bit earlier.
They signed a town charter in 1864 specifically, and that was when the town was officially founded. All of this turns out to be highly inaccurate, as history often is.
In America?
When people are reporting
In
about
the
their
South?
Well, I mean, it might surprise you to know that in Virginia in 1864, there were some untoward things happening.
Shock and horror.
So yeah, the 5 founding families are the Lockwoods, the Fells, the Forbes, the Gilberts, and the Salvatores. Each of those families, with the exception of the Fells, has a main character in the Vampire Diaries.
Right.
It's just the truth. I assume that this is also true of the books, where the Lockwoods are called the Smallwoods
Right.
instead. Yeah, I can see
And
why
I-
the CW changed that name. They were like, these teens will make jokes. Let's not give them that ammo.
Truly, the name is so rife for misuse. I will say, though, I don't remember the books very well as pertains to the founding families, but I remember that the place they lived in was called Fells Church.
Yes.
So, at least the Fells were important in that respect.
Maybe they were just like the founding family alone. I will admit there's a lot about the books that I don't know about.
I read the first 2.
They're still being published, surprisingly. But
Still
ghostwritten.
today?
Yeah, they're like on book 9 now, I think. They've been ghostwritten for like the last 6 books. Fans have said the quality has decreased.
I knew a bunch of them had been written. I didn't realize they were still going. That's crazy.
They're still going. I think they're on like their second ghostwriter now, just judging from the trajectory of the story.
Hey, glad to hear they're still being profitable. I don't know.
It's just wild to me that like they still say based on the works of L.J. Smith, and I'm like, I hope L.J. Smith is getting this money.
I hope she's getting a coin. I hope she's getting... I mean, the thing is, it's like when she signed on to do it right initially, as I understand it, it was with this company that was... I forget the type of company. I said this before in the podcast. There's a Jenny Nicholson video where she does a deep dive on the Vampire Diaries. And essentially, that company was like, here's the kind of story we're trying to tell. L.J. Smith, you are work for hire. We need you to write these books. And the fact that they've kept them going, even though there are other writers now, suggests that the intellectual property belongs to that company and not to L.J. Smith. So,
I see. Well, I guess that's fair. You know.
lawyers, IP lawyers, let us know. But that's the vibe I get.
The things we sign. Maybe one day she'll come out with Vampire Diaries Book 4, the L.J. Smith version.
I walked through the door and I just saw someone watching All Too Well 10-minute version today. That's so funny. Anyway.
I think I still have not listened to it. I was like, Taylor, I don't have 10 minutes of my life to spend on one of my least favorite albums of yours that you redid. I'm so sorry.
I will say, back when I was down with Taylor, that has waffled since for obvious reasons. I like the 10-minute version. I listen to it all the time. I did not watch the short film because I get secondhand embarrassment very easily. And I knew that there was acting in that, but I was like for a music video. So I was like, this doesn't compute my brain. And then I learned there was some improvisation in it. And I was like, okay, count me out. I am good to stay over here. Well wishes to Sadie Sink and Dylan O'Brien.
Oh, yeah, Sadie. Gosh. And then when I heard about that, I was like, age gap? And then
And it's
people
like,
were like,
it's
no, that's the
intentional.
point. And I was like, oh. And I was like, okay, I see.
But we're not here to discourse on Taylor Swift.
Yeah. None of this will make it in.
Right.
I wanted to work my way through each of the founding families systematically. However, I will preface this by saying that there are two other founding families in the background, two extra founding families, if you will, or maybe, if we want to be fair, the proto-founding families of Mystic Falls.
The
One of them is
pre-founding
present from the
families.
beginning. The pre-founding families. One of them is present from the beginning, and they're throughout the show. The other one is also present, but we don't know until the very last season, where it's suddenly shoehorned in, and it's like, oh,
okay,
so these
I
people were
guess.
done dirty.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll start off by saying that, as we mentioned in Elena's episode, Elijah does say the founding families are not actually the founders of Mystic Falls. They might have given the town its name and signed its charter and claimed the land, but my records as a 1,000-year-old man indicate that there was actually a community of people here who came from Salem and settled this area. At that point, it seems that he's like specifically talking about African Americans, and we know that Bonnie's grandmother told her that, yeah, all the black witches in this show are descended from actual witches who fled the Salem witch trials while innocent women were being persecuted.
Right.
But then we later on learned that no, they had a white friend helping them.
And the descendants keep popping up.
So that aside, the official founding families, as I said, I'll do them in alphabetical order this time.
Oh, how very fair and diplomatic of you in theme.
The Gilberts, the Fells, the Forbes, the Lockwoods, and the Salvatores.
Okay, so I don't want to put you on blast. The Gilberts would then come third if we're doing it alphabetically.
Why did I start with G? My
I
brain
do not
glitched and I was
know.
thinking of Elena. I was thinking of Elena with an
The
E.
who is primary in all respects. Oh, the E.
Also, I said Forbes. It would be Forbes's because their surname is Forbes.
I didn't want to
So,
say that
take
earlier
three.
too. I'm not here to put you down. I'm here to lift you up. Is the thing.
You know me. It's very important to me to follow the rules. Me and my vendetta against irregardless. Let's take it again. The Fells, the Forbeses, the Gilberts, the Lockwoods, and the Salvatores.
Alrighty.
I will start with the Lockwoods because they are thematically the leaders of the town. They seem to be like outright the richest ones, even richer than the Salvatores, who have a whole boarding house and a lot of land. It's possibly because they owned slaves.
It's most likely.
As we've discussed in the Tyler episode, not only was that a commonplace where people in the South, white people in the South, were getting their wealth at the time, but Tyler's mother certainly seems willing to believe that the creepy cellars that they still have in the old buildings on their property were there for slaves. Interestingly, there is a pattern with certain founding families. It's mainly in the Forbeses and the Lockwoods.
I see.
But you do see it in other families. There's a pattern where they all seem to have like hereditary careers.
Which is simply not a thing that people do across centuries, right? Like maybe if you're a normal person and you are, enamored by your parent and inspired by them in their profession, you're like, I want to go into the same thing, No, we're all reporters. We're all mayors. We're all cops. What? All right.
And I'm like, certainly in ye olden times, people tended to just take on their parents' professions. But the fact that it's like, it's the 21st century when the show starts, but here we are with every elected mayor in this town's history until Bonnie's dad shows up in season 5 that we know of is the Lockwood. And I'm
Right.
like, corruption?
They
Question mark.
held on to that power. They said, we're making the civil service job a family business. How? Misuse and abuse of power.
But I guess election campaigns cost money, and they are canonically the richest family. It is said that Jacob Lockwood was the mayor of Mystic Falls before Benjamin Lockwood. I'm not sure how that happened because I thought Benjamin was the one who signed the town charter, but maybe not. Maybe he had like an uncle or a cousin who was mayor for like, I don't know, a year before him, and then he passed it on. The Lockwoods are one of those families that has a lot of names that pop up even during the 1864 era. When we're talking about, the men who started the founding families, we mainly deal with, Benjamin Lockwood, who was the mayor. But then when we talk about, what was happening underneath with all the supernatural shenanigans that Catherine and Emily were getting up to, it's George Lockwood, his son, who was a Confederate soldier and was the earliest known Lockwood werewolf to trigger his curse, came back, started massacring the town. They have this very obvious theme of like, they are the alpha wolves. That's why they're always in charge. They're the leaders. Nearly all the Lockwoods we meet who matter and are like born into the family are men.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I think the only Lockwood who may have been born a Lockwood and is a woman and matters is Mariana Lockwood, who Stefan decapitates while feeding off of her in one of his Ripper eras.
Well,
So
tells you how much she matters.
just there to be a victim, quite frankly.
Which, tracks with that family.
Yeah, it actually does, It's this legacy of like this hyper masculine alpha male energy, which we now know is not a real wolf thing.
Yep.
But clearly like at the time the writers were creating this show was supposed to be a scientifically sound thing.
And now just becomes part of the canon of this non-scientific mystical thing. So
All these fictional stories with like werewolf packs that have an alpha wolf, and it's like, well, that's your human side coming through there, because wolves don't do
wolves don't do that shit. Y'all made that happen.
I like the idea that that's something that these human people who have lycanthropy have attributed to their wolf side, and it's like, no, that's your human nature. You're just assuming this is the beast within that feels this need to like have this hereditary leadership position of this control that you are owed, and it's like, nope.
You've used that as a tool and as a justification to let loose some inner things that you are always wanting to do, and maybe you should reflect.
And as we discussed in the Tyler episode, he ends up becoming a leader. He's very Scott McCall about it. He earns his position as leader of the hybrids, who get no names except for Kim and Adrian.
Oh, bless. Those hybrids did not stand a chance, and it's a shame. There's Chris, but he's dead before he claims the pack, I think.
Chris, who comes back in the Charmed reboot.
Wow. Great for him. Very glad he's doing well. I do not know the actor's name.
I don't know his name either, but yeah, I'd completely forgotten that until I was watching for the Tyler episode, and I was like, oh my gosh.
That's him.
It's him from Charmed.
Love to see a black man win.
He's like a scientist in that show. He's the love interest of the brainy witch.
Oh, he's like recurring. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Technically, there's two brainy witches because one of them is like a whole college. Is she a TA?
Okay.
She feels young to be a professor. She's got some sort of educational position at the university.
Gotcha.
But the eldest sister is like employed scientist working in like this biochemical capacity. Ooh. And her love interest is Chris the hybrid.
Does he have a counterpart from the original Charmed? Or do they not do a thing where it's like we're trying to evoke the original sisters? They do their own thing.
In certain ways they do. For instance, the youngest sister
is like a flake.
If we're not counting the page of it all.
Right.
The youngest sister has a half demon boyfriend.
Oh, there you go.
So I guess if we were making a comparison, he would be the equivalent of, what's his name? Prue's love interest.
Andy High. Oh, dear Andy.
Andy, there we go. Spoilers for anyone who plans on watching the Charmed reboot. Mute yourself for a few seconds. He does also die.
Yeah. So R.I.P. So I guess that definitely... Rip.
Can't have nothing. But it's interesting. He gets like this whole arc where we find out that he himself doesn't have any powers, but his family has like voodoo connections.
Oh.
And he has like mystical protection over him when I think he has a talisman or something that like is protecting him.
Okay.
He's like, oh, my grandmother, whoever gave me this, I had no idea this was a real thing. It was cool.
Wow. The talisman thing is reminding me, like voodoo talisman is Legends of Tomorrow. What's his name? Had that boyfriend. And I was like, whoa, we're letting Constantine be bi for real? This is cool.
Yeah.
Constantine had that boyfriend from New Orleans who was taken by Malice or something, or some other demon that they were introducing in the new season. I can't remember. That was fun.
How many demons did that show have? In the literal sense. Figuratively speaking, a lot.
Yeah. True. And the demons are bisexuality.
Yes! Hey, Constantine was never fighting those demons.
True.
He was embracing
He
them.
embraced them. He held hands with
A
them.
real
he
man.
made out with them like a real man. Sarah Lance too.
Sarah Lawrence was like, yeah, the only guy I've ever really wanted was Oliver Queen. And even then, not that much.
No.
It was more like the forbidden thing of my sister's boyfriend.
Right.
Once he was available, we were like, yeah, this isn't really working.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's nice to see Tyler be a Lockwood who we actually watch earn the leadership role. It's just unfortunate that he's the leader of a group of people that don't really matter that much.
And therefore the story shuffles off in quick fashion.
Murders them all. He ends up the soul hybrid, as we said in the Tyler episode. I will say, however, Carol, who marries into the family,
Queen.
she does a good job of being mayor. Like, she's keeping the peace. She's having ceasefire talks with the originals.
She's running the cover-ups.
She seems much more effective than Richard ever was. Like, the most Richard did was switch on a device that somebody else's ancestors made.
Right. And then it got him
himself
killed. And that's funny too, is that like you'd never expect watching Carol in season 1 that she would rise to the occasion. But it's like as soon as the man holding you down is out of the picture, you can become your true and full self. Because Carol was no fool. Carol was a very, like, at least the way they were writing her very, very early on, it's like, oh, she knows what's up. And then for like a period there, she's like the drunken fool, and it's like, okay, this is kind of weird. And then Richard dies, and then she's like, boom, I'm running this town. Who gonna run this town tonight? Kanye West, Rihanna. It's me, Carol Lockwood.
Behind every braggadocious alpha male type man
Is a scheming
there is a
southern
far more
woman.
capable woman. A scheming southern woman. Carol does a great job. It's tragic that she gets killed off. I remember reading some Tumblr account that would summarize Vampire Diaries episodes. When it got to the episode in which she dies, their closing words were R.I.P. Mayor Lockwood 2.0.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, huh? And I was like, oh, right, Richard was mayor before you. He's actually so forgettable as a mayor.
Truly,
Probably
who
because he
remembers?
lost one season.
Yeah.
Like, she feels like the Mayor Lockwood. When I think of Mayor Lockwood,
I think of Carol. Yeah, it's very funny enough. Another Carol, you think of Captain Marvel, you're thinking of Carol Danvers. You're not thinking of that other guy who died right at the beginning. Even though some people when that movie was coming out insisted that she was taking a man's position. They were gender bending Captain Marvel. It's like, okay, so you don't know anything, is what I'm hearing.
Wild. Also because she'd taken on the mantle in the comics before and had now permanently taken it on for
Yes.
a couple of years by the time Brie Larson played her. And I was like, and even if none of that were true and Marvel had decided to just name her Captain Marvel for this movie, which
Right.
for them is like a whole thing with DC where their Captain Marvel / Shazam is like a whole thing, and they're like, oh, we have to keep using the name so that you know our trademark doesn't lapse. I'm like, even if that had been the case, Carol Danvers has the honor of being a female counterpart to a male hero, a derivative who was always far more popular
Yes.
than the male character who came
Yes.
before her. Most people have heard of her years as Ms. Marvel and have never heard
Of that other
Marvel. But yeah, that's the Lockwoods. Not much to say on them because it's mainly Tyler and Carol for most of the series. I will say it's interesting to me that Tyler is an only child and doesn't seem to have any relevant cousins mentioned because we know Mason doesn't have a kid.
Yeah.
It might be, I'm like, is this their way of maintaining wealth? Do they just make sure that they
Keep that
have very
one
small
line
families?
coming down.
It's like
yeah.
only one person living in this mansion. Speaking of Mason, he is noted to be the black sheep of the family because he's fun and cool and he's not interested in amassing power and wealth. He just wants to go to Florida and surf, dude.
I mean,
Very
that's
much
true.
that cool, chilled uncle.
Yeah, it's the next best thing to having the family marry inside the family. You know, we frown upon incest, but now we do child limits.
At some point in the Lockwoods' history, as they're amassing wealth, one of them somehow acquires the Moonstone.
Yeah.
Which suggests that George Lockwood was not an anomaly in being a werewolf who triggered his curse. Makes sense. Men of a certain era constantly killing each other. That curse would have been triggered left, right, and center.
Consistently for a period of time. Just people going to war, right? You go to war, you kill a man for the first time, and suddenly you're a werewolf. You know, and there's enough wars to go around in that era.
That is actually what happened to George himself.
There you go.
And he shows us something that will become like a recurring theme for these founding families as well, when you connect them to their descendants, the counterparts who are their descendants, that history often repeats itself. For the Lockwoods, it's that, oh, we are at the forefront with this powerful, very patriarchal, hyper-masculine family. Beneath, we are sweating bullets trying to hide our own secrets, mainly the lycanthropy. And then we make the mistake of getting involved with Catherine Pierce.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll do it. That's the thing that will make that house of cards fall down.
Yeah, I mean, George gets away pretty okay, I guess. But for for Mason, as we know, it results in him being killed, and her only reaction is, oh, darn, guess I gotta go groom your nephew now.
Yeah, about right.
So the next family, we will go with the Forbeses. So like the Lockwoods, the Forbes family also seems to have this hereditary career thing going on. They are always the cops, it seems. Thank goodness that does not filter through to Caroline, who is our central Forbes character. She has no interest in being law enforcement.
I will say it's easier to buy that the Forbes have constantly been the cops, because that is the thing that happens where it's like cops usually get their children to then also join the force, because I think being a cop puts you in the mind of like, well, this is what will put my kid on the straight and narrow if they have even the slightest deviation from my instruction as a parent. So you usually find that cops have their children become cops, who have their children become cops. And if you work your way high enough and you've got that Forbes name that people respect, eventually you're the sheriff of this small town, because everybody respects the Forbes. And your dad was a sheriff, so it feels natural.
Speaking of the straight and narrow. The straight and narrow. Liz Forbes, queer-coded question mark? I don't know.
This is the thing. Since the first time watching the show, because the first time I watched that show and I saw Liz Forbes, I was like, that's a lesbian woman. Obviously, things are more complex than that. And looking back, Liz isn't as butch as I initially thought she was.
Yeah.
So I'll relax my comments on that. But also, it really does feel like sometimes, and maybe that was why they threw in Bill to be like, actually, he's the gay one, because it really feels like Liz should be. I like the idea of their lavender marriage, you know? She certainly never has any romantic implication throughout the entire show.
Caroline throws that shade in like episode 5 when she's like, Mom, if I want to talk boys, I'll call Dad. At least he's successfully dating one. And it's like, damn, okay. And then Liz's love life is never discussed again until that episode where Silas almost kills her and Caroline is like trying to resuscitate her. And she's like, Mom, please wake up. I'll get you out of this town. I'll find you a nice man. Just please live. And it's like, does she want?
Does she want a man? I don't know.
Are we sure?
I honestly don't think
maybe
so.
she's just ace. Who knows?
Who knows? And again, like, I don't know if that wouldn't be lavender. A violet marriage. I actually love that interpretation, because Liz and Bill never seem like they were, at least within the text of the show, that they were at odds until Bill comes back and starts torturing Caroline. So I would love the idea that like they got together in the 90s. They were like, listen, we're in a southern town. It's a certain time. Let's just hitch our wagons together so people will be happy. You're a founding family guy. People have expectations of you, right? So we'll have this kid, because I also want a kid, and then we'll just live. And then we hit like 2007 and things were a little bit more relaxed, a little more liberal, and Bill goes, well, you know, we've been doing well this long, but now I'm like, maybe we deserve to be happy and it's a little bit safer to do so. So I'm gonna head out and find my Steve, and you should find your Karen or whoever, and then we'll be good. And we'll co-parent our now 16-year-old daughter.
It certainly feels like an amicable separation on their part. Pre the whole torture thing. As I said before, I'm still not entirely sure how Liz is a founding family member. Like, is she a Forbes by birth? Are Caroline's parents distant cousins?
How do you mean?
Because there was the whole thing where she's like, she definitely seems to have been like born into this. When she speaks to Caroline at the start of season 3, she says that your father and I have beliefs that were passed down for generations and we were taught never to stray from them. And it seems as though this is something she was raised in.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay. And it seems as though the Founders Council doesn't really accept people who aren't related to those 5 families.
Well, we do later on in the series, season 3 and season 4, start learning there are people on the Founders Council who are not necessarily founding families. When Alaric goes in to start talking to people.
What's his name? Meredith's ex.
Meredith's guy, yes. Exactly. So there's people like him who are just in there, and it's like, maybe you are an ancillary of the Founders family whose name then changed because people get married off. Or maybe some people just find out, and rather than tell them they're crazy, it's like, well, maybe you have a job that's useful and we could use you on the council.
It seems so implied. Like, the text seems to treat her like a Forbes by birth, especially with the whole, there's the line of Forbes sheriffs. We've got William Forbes, who was sheriff in the 1860s, and then Gerald Forbes, who was sheriff in 1912 when Samantha Gilbert was on her killing spree. And it's like, are you?
Are you a Forbes?
It is the South.
Did the cousins get married? But also it's like, it could be a thing where, again, because Bill's gay, and this is all tied into that whole shit where it's like, because our impotent son couldn't take up the family mantle, let's get his far more impressive wife to do it, right? I don't know.
It could be.
There's a number
He
of things.
definitely seems like more of a cerebral character. He's like the mind over matter.
Exactly.
Immune to compulsion just by thinking really hard.
Exactly. And the Forbes saw that and said, okay, he doesn't want to pick up a gun, so now what do we do? Yeah, I don't know. Again, they never get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sheriff thing has really stumped me now. I didn't think about that.
On the topic of the sheriff thing, Liz, my queen, my dear, my captain of the guard, the Lockwoods might just be out there enjoying the high life with their slave money. Having pageants every other week to pat themselves on the back. But ultimately, they're not doing a lot. You, the corruption.
Let's not give the cops too much credit, especially because the police force in the States, as we know it, evolved from slave catching bands. So, they don't have the best start, the Forbes, either. I know what shit they were doing in the 1800s, in the late 1700s.
You know what? That's probably true. And you know what's interesting? We don't really, in the era of the Salvatores as humans, we don't really see much of the Forbes family.
No, we only ever see the Salvatores and a little bit of Lockwood and a little bit of Fell when we need a woman to die.
Oh, Thomas Fell is there too, and it's his church.
Oh, wow.
Fell's church.
There you go.
That is involved. So weirdly, in that one instance, the Fells are closer to the center of things. We've got Jonathan Gilbert bringing the Gilberts in, but the Forbes is just like, well, where are they? They were probably busy catching slaves.
That's
because
true.
it was 1864.
They were slave catching.
That's my headcanon
The
now.
Lockwoods had slaves and they ran away and they said, "Oi, Forbes, go sort that shit out." And they said, "No problem, it's what I live to do." So,
and that's why Caroline said, nah, not me. I'm not about this legacy. I'm going to go into journalism.
Yeah.
And then never mention it again for 5 seasons. And then post-time jump, I'm
real
suddenly
quick,
a
I'm back
journalist.
into it. Crazy.
On the topic of journalism, it's time. We're halfway.
We're here.
It's time to talk about the Fells.
Ooh, the reporters, the news writers, the paper owners. We love them.
Are they though? Because that's what the show seems to initially be setting up. We've got Logan Fell, who is our Fell character we're introduced to in 2009, season 1.
Yes.
And when Elena's doing her research to try and find out how old is this Stephen Salvatore fella, she finds that there was a Franklin Fell, I believe, who was a reporter
In the 50s.
But then after that, that falls away from like the center of the plot. And even in season 1 itself, when we learn about, the forefathers of each family, their founding father was Thomas Fell, who was, I think, the owner of the church, if not the one running the church, or like the priest himself. That's why it's called Fell's Church in the show, like the physical church.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you started off as, I guess, religious leaders.
I mean, to be fair, back in the day, churches, before the advent of newspapers, churches were where you got the town news. They ring the bell and they make the announcements, the town-wide announcements. It was the church that did that.
I can only imagine how that must have unfolded.
Well, theocratic societies. This is around the time where we're slowly doing away with it, but assumedly in the southern US, you have those leanings still. So that actually kind of tracks, for me at least.
That's fair. I'll allow it. Then we get Dr. Fell,
Yeah, well,
Meredith.
she's that whole outlier. There's nothing I can do about her.
Black sheep of the family. She's the Mason. It's all right. And then there's Trip, who is a cook. Sort of. So, Cook as in his surname. So, that's all right.
Still not sure what his goddamn job is.
Really should have been a Forbes, considering what he's up to.
Exactly. And he clearly
wants to be a cop.
Yeah.
Yeah, Liz is like, sir, you don't have a badge. You need to back up just a little bit. And Trip is like, well...
I have this shirt that I printed and it's got a symbol that's basically the police badge. Because what are you doing, Liz Forbes? It's like, all right.
I'm deputizing these impressionable 20-somethings to be like my little honor guard.
As I've deputized myself.
Meredith does say, in her opinion, that the fell trait is being busybodies. So...
Which is true of the church and of the newspaper and of her as a singular doctor who likes to know who the vampires are.
And Trip, I guess.
And Trip, the busiest body.
But I guess the only other fell of note would be Tobias, who was head of the Historical Society and is then murdered by vampire ghosts.
Mercilessly.
History is sort of like
stage.
news.
Listen, as long as it's written down, I'll accept it.
All the other fells, I will say, because the thing about the fells is whether you feel that they're following a through line with like their career legacy or not, they are very much the founding family that doesn't get a lot of screen time.
Yeah.
You don't really know that much about. We never meet like a main teenage character who is a fell. There are several fells mentioned in the background, like Tina, Valerie, Blair, who are just like Miss Mystic
pageants. Yeah. I don't remember because Meredith is a fell in the show, but not in the book. She's a Sulez.
No.
Is there a fell who matters in the books? I honestly don't know.
I don't think so, because the books have Matt Honeycutt,
Yes.
Tyler Smallwood,
Yes.
Vicky
And then obviously
Bennett,
Gilbert, Salvatore.
Bonnie McCullough, which I realized,
Yeah.
side note, Bonnie uses as a fake name in season,
Yes, in season 7.
when she's in the ward.
It was really good. It was a really good reference. I liked it.
In my head, there's always this line from Tina Fell, who was one of the Miss Mystic pageant girls, who, when talking yourself up to like little council and being like, oh, what have I done for the community? She mentions that, I don't think that my community service was any less valid because it was mandatory for my DUI conviction.
Yeah.
And I'm like, girl.
That was crazy. And you know what? Props. If a villain can't be Miss Mystic, then what does our town stand for? Okay?
There's this trope, I can't remember what it's called, but it's usually when you have in a story, you have a group of like things, whether it's like schoolhouses or like families in a town or like nations in a fictional fantasy world. And there's always that one that just isn't as fleshed out as the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the Fells. The Hufflepuffs of... No, the Ravenclaws.
The Ravenclaws.
Of-
They would be the Ravenclaws.
Ravenclaws of Mystic Falls.
It's like,
True
we
that.
know you're there and you get referenced every now and then and you sometimes get like a character, but it's never like...
No one important, certainly.
The next family. The Gilberts.
Yeah.
I would call them the brains of the operation.
Yes.
They tend to be, I mean, all the families seem to have journals, it's implied, but they tend to be the ones who are like famously writing stuff down. And that is something that carries through to Elena. Like she initially wants to be a writer. Also, her father is in STEM.
Yeah, true that.
He's a doctor, also / creepy Augustine scientist. Elena ends up becoming a doctor herself.
They're inventors, they're experimenters, they're the journalists. They're all about examining the supernatural and really getting to understand it and trying to find ways so that the humans can work against it or use it to their favor.
And we've got their founder, Jonathan Gilbert the Elder,
Icon.
who made inventions that didn't work.
Yeah. Absolute fool. Madman. Love him though.
But he tried. He has that reputation for being, Jonathan Gilbert who went insane. And as the years go by, you can see his ramblings in his journals are more and more ludicrous and unhinged. And it's like, well, maybe he wasn't wrong.
You know?
And maybe, given how the mystical world expands in legacies, maybe all the stuff he wrote about was actually real and you guys are the dumb ones.
You guys were the fools now that we realize. And also, as we discussed recently in the Rick episode, potentially having his mind worsened by the Gilbert ring that he was wearing and having died a good few times with it on. But we don't know that for certain. But that could have been what was driving him a little bit wonky. So let's have some respect and some care for the mentally ill, I think. I think all of you are being jerks. Like...
His namesake, Uncle John,
Oy.
Uncle Biological Father John, who we often hate. It cannot be denied. He's also quite brainy. He's always like digging up ancient lost artifacts and histories that nobody's ever heard of, tracking people down. I guess that's his thing. He's like the whole Scooby-Doo gang in one.
He is the Gilbert trade made physical, made mobile, because he's not sitting in a room making notes. He's out there finding the information. They're the scouts.
Yeah. I have, yeah. Yeah, I'll put a pin in that. The Scouts.
Right.
No, I was trying to find a label for each family. And
Sure,
I'm like,
sure.
oh, the Scouts.
Yeah.
All right.
Very brainy bunch.
The Lost family.
Damn, that was quick.
I mean, there's not much to say about the Gilberts that we
Really
haven't
not.
already said in Elena episodes and Alaric when he takes over for them. We know what it is. I will circle back to talk about Samantha in a moment.
Okay.
When I'm done, like, going through each family.
Because I was like, that's the only other one I can think of.
The Lost family on our list is one who is always very central to the plot and rather fleshed out, but who I must say seems to have the fewest relevant members, like,
Yes.
ever mentioned by name.
Because the most prominent ones are from the founding of the town, and they did not have any descendants.
And I guess their half-brother just started a line of, like, only children, because whenever they come back to town, there's, like, one uncle/nephew living in their house.
Half-brother? Is this half-brother real? Or did she just make
Yeah,
that
that's
up?
Giuseppe's child out of wedlock. Remember, Damon's like, the
yes!
Salvatore line had to go somewhere. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about that.
He's never seen, never named.
Oh, rip. And that's how we get... Is it both Zach and Tom Avery who are connected to that guy?
Tom Avery, I have no idea who he's descended from because we're never explicitly told that he's related to Stefan. It's very weird and vague. I thought they would at least go the route of, like, implying something with his name, but it's just like, oh, here's your doppelganger who doesn't live too far away. His name is Thomas Avery. And it's like, oh, is Tom Avery Italian? Is he a Salvatore?
I guess
Why
to
doesn't
be
his
fair-
name start with an S like Silas and Stefan?
To be fair, he doesn't need to be that closely related because he just needs to be a doppelganger of Silas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
But also, we're never told if there's like multiple doppelganger bloodlines or is there just one? Because Catherine is Elena's descendant.
Yeah, directly.
Elena is Catherine's descendant, and Catherine is
Tatia's.
Tatia's descendant.
So weird.
I don't know.
Yeah, we just needed a Stefan doppelganger to kill, so we did it.
For Enzo to murder. Ugh. And for Caroline to be tempted to murder and then ultimately be like, no, I can't do this.
Yeah, which sets the seeds for Stereline.
Interestingly, even though the Lockwoods have that legacy of we were always in charge, it kind of looked like Giuseppe Salvatore was running the show back in the day. So I'm like, maybe that makes him a general rather than a king. I don't know. But
Interesting.
because we don't have our Forbes stand in as like law enforcement in that era. We don't really see the Forbeses. So
I mean, I guess you just rock up as a forceful man with a shotgun and I guess people are gonna listen, you know?
murder your own sons for betraying the Founders Council.
You know? And people fall in line real quick. They're like, that guy's real committed.
The Salvatore's thing in the modern era seemed to be the growing of vervain, which Uncle Nephew Zach had been cultivating in secret.
King.
Once Damon murders him, he takes over the council and is like, hey, I've got all this vervain here. This will win your loyalty, and now I'm ingratiated to all of you by providing this anti-vampire elixir.
Which does track to their back in the day thing of being the loggers and the woods people. They like got all the wood for the town for building and
they're
making
the green
fires.
thumbs.
Yeah.
I like it. They're
It's
the plant
interesting that
elementals.
they're like the botanists, they're the amity, but also Giuseppe's with a shotgun. It's like, what? I was Octavia Spencer holding a shotgun. What is this about?
But yeah, the founding family is unsurprisingly very patriarchal in nature.
Yes.
The official 5 ones. Most of the characters we meet are, well, from each family are men. And often when a woman is mentioned, it's usually to be the victim in some story.
Yeah.
It's like Honoria Fell, who died along with her husband Thomas when Stefan first became a vampire. It's Mariana Lockwood being rippered by Stefan Stefan in a later Ripper era. It's Samantha Gilbert being the victim of the Gilbert Ring's corruption and then being driven clinically insane and murdering people and then dying in an asylum even after the ring was removed. And it's like, what's going on here? Why is it you're either in the Mystic pageant or you're a victim
or
of
you're
some
dying from some supernatural. It sucks. And I was like thinking about this too. Well, I didn't look this up while thinking about this. This was for a separate thing, but I was looking up like monster hunters in the public domain. This is for a separate like writing thing because I wanted to make a reference and I didn't want to run into any like litigation problems. I don't know, who knows. And I happened to come across like the Dracula story because one of the people they mentioned was Mina. I want to say Harker, but she had a different surname. Mata?
Mina Murray is her maiden name.
Murray.
Maybe it was
Mina
that.
Murray and her role in the Dracula story, because obviously it's Van Helsing and it's Jonathan Harker who are like the guys who are in opposition to Dracula, and she's of course the one who gets bitten by Dracula and he's like threatening to turn her into a vampire.
Yes.
But like then she gains like telepathic ability which she uses to track Dracula down, and then that's how they get to him. So it's like genre-wise existing in this like vampire genre that the Vampire Diaries is in. If Bram Stoker could do it in 18 whatever, why in a 2009 show are we doing this patriarchal bullshit? Obviously it's like within the text, you know, maybe it's part of the story we're trying to tell, but also this show, there are a lot of women in the show who are powerful, so it's like it seems to me less textual and more a bias, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. I guess with the flashbacks to the other Forbes sheriffs, they're both men. And it's like, yeah, but the one that we have as our reference is a woman. And she's doing the sheriff thing.
She's doing
she's pulling out that gun.
And she's running that town.
She's telling Alaric, look, I don't want to believe you're killing people, but we need to, follow this rule book now. Another woman who is a member of the founding families, who is, shoehorned in at the very end, Sarah Salvatore, again, ends up being a victim. She's a victim of Damon's regular violence against his own family. Stefan hides her away and tries to care for her on the DL. And then ultimately she's pointlessly killed so that the sirens can prove a point.
Right.
And it's like... you could have brought her into the show as a character. Lord knows you could do with some color on that cast.
I mean...
But instead...
They did, but for Enzo's storyline, which we all care about and enjoy immensely.
I mean, bring her in as like a main with the Mystic Falls gang.
We can't have another black girl on the cast? What are you talking about? What are you crazy? Come on now. Talk nonsense. We had Monique for like a hot second, and I don't even know what she is, if I'm being honest. I don't want to make assumptions, but they killed her off real quick. And guess who did that?
But in as much as the official founding family members are usually focused on, the men, we have one of the OG founding families, the ones who are dismissed and disregarded despite people officially knowing that they've been there for centuries, the Bennets.
Yes.
And they are a very matriarchal family.
Yeah.
Every Bennett we meet is a woman. The surname, if anything, seems to be carried down the female line. I don't know how they're doing that, but...
Every single one was like, you try and tell me I can't name my daughter after me and you see what I do to you. I got magic powers, bitch. Try me. And they kept it going.
Because we have Abby Bennett Wilson, and I was like, so was
Still
Sheila
no
married
idea
to a
where
Wilson?
that Wilson came from.
Or...
I don't know.
Because initially I was ready to be like, okay, Bonnie's father must be a Wilson. And then he shows up and he's Rudy Hopkins, and I'm like, what are we doing? What's happening?
And it's like, Sheila didn't change her name to Bennett Wilson, so why would Abby actively... I guess they were like, she's changing her name because she's left home, but she didn't change it that much. She just added another name to it. So I don't know what the Bennett Wilson's about. Maybe
it's Jamie's dad, but I don't think they got married.
No.
Because then he's an official stepbrother to Bonnie, and that's weird.
Not ready to talk about that today.
But yeah, the Bennett witches, they are very much like Emily with all of John's inventions. They are in the background, they're undercover, they're protecting the human world from the supernatural on the DL from as early as the days of Ayana running around with the Michelson family. We've got Emily, who was indebted to Catherine, but was secretly like, I'm not going to let you and your vampire friends slaughter this town of innocents, even though I myself am not from this town. She arrived there with her brother, though, so I guess when she was traveling with Catherine, she had some relatives in tow, because we're told that Emily Bennett did have a brother, and then she has descendants of the town. So I don't know when she had time to have kids.
Right. And I don't know where the rest of those people are. She tells Damon, I have family in Mystic Falls that I need you to protect, which is why I'm telling you Catherine's in the tomb. We don't ever see any of those people. So I don't know what the thread is there. Presumably that's where Lucy comes from that original echelon that Emily's referring to.
Yes. I mean, Lucy's certainly not from the town, so I guess they moved away.
Yeah.
And branched out, which is okay. I mean, families do that. It's all right. It's nice to me that it's like, yeah, the protectors of the town are like officially this founding family, which is full of men that are just messing it up every step of the way.
Yeah.
And underneath that, it's like, yeah, the Bennett witches who were out here creating nearly every mystical artifact that is here to protect you. You've got this Gilbert device and these Gilbert rings, which are heirlooms. And it's like, nope, Bonnie's ancestors made those.
Right. They're the ones combating the sirens in the early 1800s. They're the ones trying to stop that bell and the hellfire. They're the ones who do it at the end of the show as well. Like, the Bennetts do the most for that town. And they don't get their due.
That Emily must have not been from Mystic Falls, but then circled back, because as we say, her family has been there since before.
Yes.
Maybe she was just a cousin. She was a cousin from out of town, and she was like, I'm going to come back.
Up.
Because Beatrice Bennett was there when the town was actually founded. Bonnie has that lovely moment. We'll delve deeper into it in a Bonnie episode, but Bonnie has that lovely moment at the end of season 1 where she tells Stefan, look how powerful I was. Look what I did with the fire when I saved your idiot brother from being burned up in this like plan to rid the town of tomb vampires once and for all. I know how powerful I am. I know who I am now. I'm going to protect this town. And if we're going to live here in harmony, you and your brother need to behave.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to take you both down. And it feeds into this thing we discussed before where I said it would have been nice to see these Mystic Falls gang teens like take on these roles of like this Teen Titans version of the Founders Council. Because like Bonnie, even at the start of season 6, when she and Damon meet, who's that heretic, the first heretic to die?
Malcolm.
I always forget his name. When she and Damon meet Malcolm's like, who are you? And she's like, Town Witch. And I'm like, she really is.
She really is. Arguably, she's the only one to do it. She's the one who like becomes the Emily of this town, constantly like saving the people and not getting any credit for it. So in a way, she definitely succeeds. The rest of them all just like completely either divert into another family's role or just abandon it completely, because Caroline takes a fell job, she becomes a reporter. Matt takes a Forbes job, becomes a cop. Elena becomes a doctor, which I guess you could argue is also a fell job, but doctor wasn't any of the originals.
But I guess her dad was a doctor, so like the brainy Gilberts.
I guess in that way then, yeah. I guess she succeeded.
Maybe she'll have an ethical Augustine society.
God, I hope.
We'll pay vampires to come and do volunteer research.
The day we spoke about that, I became so mad that wasn't real, and instead that entire season was just about her and Damon. God, how disappointing.
But also Elena, and obviously more so Jeremy, they do have that whole vampire hunter arc.
True.
Each of them. So, there's that. And Tyler, obviously, werewolf legacy, that's his main thing. Unavoidable, inescapable.
Yeah.
He does live up to that. Though he doesn't seem particularly interested in leading the town, but as Carol says to him in, what ends up being her last words to her son, she says, oh, your father was a leader, you're a leader too, he would have been proud of you. And I'm like, not that we're necessarily trying to impress that man, but it's nice that Tyler ends up living up to that legacy.
Yeah.
Of taking charge and protecting those who need his protection, which is what the Founders Council is all about.
It should be, yeah.
Our lost family, the bonus founding family.
And truly lost in all respects, because right at the end of the show,
the very last season, we learned that Matt and Vicky's father was a man whose surname was Maxwell, and that he was linked to that boring armory that nobody cares about.
Yep.
And to the original founding of this town. And that this is something that Matt's father, Peter, was well aware of.
Yeah.
He spent his life feeling very dejected and ignored by, the status quo of this town, where it's like, oh, look at the Fells and the Forbeses and the Gilberts and etc. These rich, wealthy, influential, affluent founding families. And then, look, it's the Maxwells. They do nothing. They have blue collar jobs. They work with their hands.
Working class class wretches.
They're not even making money like owning a lodging company like the Salvatores.
Right.
And the whole time he knew that, well, actually, my family were here with the African Americans who first settled this town.
Right.
And I guess
I guess they were chill.
that's what being an ally gets you.
I guess they were black allies and they got stepped over for it. They were like, actually, we don't believe in keeping slaves. And the founding families said, well, we are taking over.
Maybe that's even why the Maxwells were poor. Maybe they were like, we're not going to own freaking human beings. And people were like, okay, more for me then.
Yeah, and we're
You
just
made
going to
your
use them
choice.
to make our money. And the Maxwells were like, oh no. And then they were poor.
When Matt finds out about his legacy and, you know, this whole town bell that is connected to hell itself and all that nonsense, and that the Maxwells are founding family, he is quite peeved and he's like, wow, Dad, growing up, all my friends were part of the founding families. I guess he's counting Bonnie as a founding family member. Or maybe he's just ignoring her. I don't know. It would be wild if he was. But he's like, I always felt so excluded. And we certainly see that Vicky felt that way in her life as well when she tells Jeremy that, oh, you know, you're grieving your parents, but you're still a Gilbert. If you'd only told me about my heritage and my legacy, I could have felt way more connected to this town that I've been stuck in because of my circumstances. And it's like, yeah, the founding families, as much as there's this prestige connected to legacy, it's also like, yeah, all the pitfalls of legacy as well, all the generational curses, all the issues that come with knowing where you come from. Elena deals with that in season 5 when she learns about Augustine and she's like, oh, I thought my dad was a doctor who helped people, but he was kind of
he was a founding
scientist.
family doctor, girly. He was carrying out the family business.
Caroline, when she finds out what is going on in Mystic Falls and is initially at odds with her mother, who she's not out to yet as a vampire, is like, oh wow, my mother just covers up like murders all the time. Also, she's perfectly willing to just kill innocent vampires without giving them a chance to prove that they aren't a danger like I am. And as I said before, when Caroline's mother tells about, oh, your father and I, we have these beliefs, etc., etc., when she gives Caroline that speech, Caroline is like, yeah, but you learned to like stray from your beliefs and open up your mind. And Caroline's mother's like, yeah, I did because you taught me to. We do see initially in season 2 when she briefly knows what Caroline is before her memories are erased. She's like, ugh, get her out of here. I don't want to look at her.
The response
She's revolted
is not
by her.
great. Yeah.
Even Vampaloric says to Elena, do you think your parents would be proud of what you are now, this human girl who just helps vampires when they tried to protect this town from them? So yeah, a lot of baggage that comes with these founding families.
Certainly. I mean, you come from, quote, good stock, as they like to say. You come from generational wealth. You're always going to have a leg up over a lot of other people. But at the same time, you do not get to that point without just being batshit insane as a family and as a lineage.
True.
You do not get to that point without just being so royally messed up, and royally, to make a pun of it, like this royal lineage is similarly are just like never okay. A lot of them are just like hella problems internally, even if like materially they're doing really well. So plenty of pitfalls, as you say. Not a good time.
Not a good time.
And not a good time for anyone else, because that always spills out until the regular folks. So who's this helping?
It's so true. But hey, I guess their ancillary members do end up at the start of season 4, well, actually end of season 3, being like, screw this nonsense. You guys are corrupt and largely ineffective.
Right.
We're taking over. No more like family name nonsense. I'm Pastor Young and I'm going to lead the council. And we're calling it the town council now. Rebrand.
Right. You ever seen a Young among the founding families? No, it's me, bitch. And try and stop me. I've got 10 men who've got guns.
But then they all get blown up. So
Truly in the
doesn't
same
last.
episode. So didn't do all that much, I guess.
But you know, for the few hours that they were, you know,
They were
working,
real
they were
hot
effective
shit.
in what they were doing. They even clocked that Elena was probably not human. They were like, this girl is acting weird. She's
Right.
walking in the sun and not burning, but something here.
Something's
is a little-
off.
Yeah.
I do love that they never know about the daylight rings. It's always so funny to be like, damn, y'all know so much about vampires, but y'all are still always behind. And hey, that's a testament to the witches and their secrecy.
It's this closely guarded secret, and that's why I'm like, it made more sense when the rings were such an exclusive trait Like you got Logan, newbie vamp, like interrogating Damon. Damon is being tortured and just doesn't tell him. He goes to Stefan and is like, "Oh, I'm gonna cause havoc if you don't tell me, or I'll out you to the Founders Council." And Stefan is like, "You want to know how you walk in the sun? You can't. Ooh. I'm not gonna tell you." And like when they're still trying to figure out, oh, what are these vampire attacks happening in season 1? And you've got Liz and Carol and Richard discussing it, and they're like, we've always assumed that vampires can only attack at night because they can't walk in the sun, but we have to maybe consider the possibility that that's not true anymore. Maybe they've evolved somehow. In another world, in an ideal world where we had POC voices permeating the writer's room, specifically indigenous voices to the point that I'm about to make. It would have been interesting to have an indigenous founding family, since they chose to go the route of, the werewolves are descended from indigenous Americans.
And the fact that this land that they settled on belonged to quote unquote indigenous tribes that were living there at the time.
Yes. It would have been so interesting to see how does that factor into legacy and wealth and your place in society and, you being blue bloods in this Western world.
Yeah.
Like, what is your history with the town? Alas, we just get the Lockwoods, who are seemingly white, even though the main Lockwood is played by a Hispanic actor and might not be
and
white. And
also, by the canon, have like distant native ancestry. It is also, as you're saying, like the Founders Council textually has a history of like enslavement and gaining like feudal power when they settle on that land, but they truncated there instead of like going further back to be like, and also settler colonialism, right? Because they talk about settling the town and it's this really exciting thing, but it's like you settled land that wasn't yours, and we rarely ever talk about it unless it's just to like color a rivalry from 1,000 years ago for our new antagonists. It's like, well, yeah, let's get into the fact that as colonialists, y'all showed up to America and took people's land.
I guess the founding family, as we see them, the founding families from the 1860s, they've already been in America.
Yeah.
Lord knows where they came from. It definitely would have been nice to like explore the history, because we only really learn about Elena's history, and it's not through her founding family side. It's through Isabel's Petrova ancestry. Yeah.
And I guess part of that might have been to avoid an uncomfortable and also like ill-informed storyline that they try to tell, because let's be honest, we're on the CW. Will we be able to tell this story properly? But then at the same time, it's like, then why involve?
And yet they're like black people in the South in the 19th century.
Right.
Indigenous Americans frolicking with Vikings sailing on their land.
Right. It's like, where do you choose arbitrarily to draw the line? I don't know.
It would have been nice. But alas, we get what we get. The Founders Council is largely antagonists to the main group who never really consider themselves a part of it. It's like Damon's in the council pretending to be there and like manipulating them.
Right, to cover his own ass.
Yeah. As soon as Liz and Carol are brought into the fold, they're really looking out for their kids.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Yeah. By slow crawl, the Founders Council becomes more corrupt than it already is, because everybody's got a tie to the supernatural and now we've got to protect them. So it's like, ooh, we don't even serve our job anymore, like Vampilaric says.
But yeah, we haven't watched Legacies, as we often say.
Right.
Maybe there ends up being more or a new sort of faction of people trying to protect the town, because like you've got Alaric and his Saltzman twins, presumably.
I think it's just Matt. I really think it's just Matt left in that town, and he's like, I'm the sheriff and I'm the law, if I'm being honest.
But Hope comes back, and her family lived in that town centuries ago. So
who knows?
Hope is like, actually, my family were the original settlers of this land.
Do you hear about the Vikings? 1000 AD, I actually run this town. We get it. Ooh, you're a vampire and a werewolf and a witch. I'm so happy for you. How do I have to acting like that's her fault? She not to be born.
1/4 witch, truly.
Anyway.
But yeah, that's all I have to say on the founding families as a whole. I was going to circle back to saying that I wanted to label each of them a thing, and you gave me the idea of like the scouts, the Gilberts are the scouts.
Right.
Obviously the Lockwoods are the leaders. I guess the Salvatores are I don't know.
It's like resources, right? The raiders? No.
Yeah, they do have resources because, like, they're rich, but not as rich as the Lockwoods, but they certainly provide a lot.
Yeah.
What would the Fells be? Because that's the most nebulous group.
So we agreed it's all like news and like information, disseminating information to the town or to the council. I guess messengers.
Oh, okay.
Leaders, the scouts, the messengers, the protectors. That's from Teen Wolf. The guardians. With the Durok,
druids.
apparently. Yeah. The Salvatores would be the druids.
Oh my gosh! There it is, the Salvatores of the Druids.
But they don't use magic. They just grow. They just cut trees.
I guess vervain is inherently magical, so, you know, growing it,
That's
you
true.
could say.
The jacks, maybe? Like lumberjack?
They're like working the land itself. They're like down there, agriculture, whatever you want to call it. The Gilberts are the scribes.
That was an option, but then I was like, yeah, I guess scribes would work, but that doesn't suggest like thinking it suggests recording. If anything, the Fells would be the scribes.
Yeah, I guess the Fells would be the scribes.
Yeah.
The Gilberts are the the masterminds.
That one feels too modern, though, is the thing. They're like, okay, doctors, thinkers, physicians, alchemists, inventors, artificers. Where are we? Are any of these words clicking?
The wise the wise people.
Yeah, sages. That's a good one, I think. What was like Aristotle
sage.
and like all those people? Philosophers. Because philosopher had a broad term.
Another Teen Wolf.
True. That's just, again, the Teen Wolf Season 3. Oh, God.
And then the Forbeses are the Guardians.
Yes.
No, it was Warriors. It was Warriors. There
It
we
was
go.
warriors. I don't know. What did we get to? Hold on. We said leaders, scouts, scribes, philosophers, and the Salvatores are the only thing.
Maybe they could be like the wards, perhaps.
What does in what context?
In the sense that they're providing the vervain that like protects people.
No, I mean, what's the definition of ward in this context?
Oh, a ward in like the protective barrier around something. First line of defense, maybe. I don't
never
know.
heard that used to describe people, is why I think I didn't go to that immediately.
Warden. Now I'm thinking of Warden of the North. Oh well, we tried.
I was also thinking about the North. I was like, is that where we're going? Are they the wards, the wardens, the rangers?
They're the Night's Watch.
They definitely cut down some wood.
You got the Lockwoods in King's Landing.
Why is the Salvatore stumping me?
I guess it's because
It's such a specific job.
maybe they're more like, because they sort of delve into all sorts of things. They're like doing like the groundwork of soldiers, like protecting, but then they're also like really wealthy and like have all the resources. But then they're also like journaling things, at least where Stefan is concerned. Maybe they're the jack of all trades.
I guess if they were also doing some protecting at the time, we can have them be rangers. Because it's like they work in the woods and then they also have guns. So leaders, scouts, scribes, philosophers, rangers, smiths for the Donovans, not the Donovans, the Maxwells, and... Hold on. I
Bonnie?
had one in my head. Yes, for the Bennets. I was like magic, but sounding more normal.
The mages?
It was very magical. There's a word for what was Rasputin to like the Russian Empire. I guess they just called him
priest?
a sorcerer. Yes, the priests.
There we go.
They would be the priests in a clerical sense.
Oh, there we have it. Interesting bit of trivia that just popped into my head. I meant to mention it earlier. Well, it's not that interesting. It's just a funny thing to note of the founding families, and that includes the Maxwells and the Bennets. The Lockwoods, who have the werewolf gene, are the only family that we never see a character turned into a vampire. No Lockwood vampires.
If you're not counting the hybrid.
Well, yeah, not counting the hybrid. Yeah, Klaus is very special
Yeah,
little
right.
creation. Like we never see, and it made me wonder that if Klaus tried to, or anyone tried to turn a regular
Before they were
untriggered
triggered.
Lockwood, yeah, would that take, or would it not work the way that the hybrids couldn't work without doppelganger blood to complete the transition?
I don't know, and that's very interesting.
Because it's like they're supposed to not be supernatural. They can be compelled, but then the Gilbert device worked on them. So it's
Right.
like,
Yeah. A real question mark, those untriggered werewolves.
maybe in Legacies, who knows? Maybe one day we'll be forced to watch.
Yeah, and we'll see that. Actually, we've covered that. Don't worry about it. Amidst our fairies and our dragons, we've spoken about that. I know there's a werewolf on the main cast, but they treat him like he's worse than all other werewolves because he's got like double anger issues. He is black, if you were wondering. So, there's that to deal with.
Oh, they also have a black vampire.
I thought that was
finally,
fun. Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
main character.
He's
Yeah.
not the most central, but he's always on screen.
He was in Logan. He's part of that helpful black family that just gets absolutely slaughtered.
He is. I knew I
Yeah.
recognized him. Oh, that whole thing was so sad. I like that Logan movie, but like it makes some choices where I'm like, all right, okay. Then I'm gonna see a clone of Wolverine and have them fight. And then I'm gonna see Boyd Holbrook, who I didn't know at the time and didn't particularly like. I was just like, this back half of the movie is not my favorite. But then the kids show up and I'm like, hell yeah, you get him, Brother Nature. You don't get a lot to do, but I like you, kid.
They were fun. They were fun. When they're all ganging up on Donald. Was it?
Yeah.
Is he Donald Pierce?
That's
Yeah,
Donald
on
Pierce, yeah. Mr. Reaver himself.
He's so not comic book Donald Pierce, apart from his cyborg nature. There's like I forget often. I'm like, you are not an aristocratic Hellfire Club member. Anyway, that is it for the famous founding families. If you have any questions or thoughts, you can mail us at animalattackpod@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at animattackpod. That's at ANIM attackpod on Twitter, and you'll find our link tree in the bio, which has all of our online stuff. Till next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.
Cheers.